Hello, it's Prof. Brian. In this video, I'm going to go over the clause layout for Jonah chapter 1. We're not going to look at the translation of every single phrase within Jonah chapter 1. We're just going over this tool and trying to look at how it helps us see the flow of the story and just to check our work to see whether or not you've done it correctly. So mostly all of our preterites are out here to the margin. You see Vayehi is out to the margin. Then we have direct speech. So all of that gets indented as a block. And our key clause, which gives support for our three volitional clauses that are the main line here, the key clause is indented one more level compared to those. Then we have a series of preterites. With Jonah as the subject of all of those. That makes another paragraph. Now, I chose to use a dotted line to separate the two paragraphs, trying to show the different chunks of the story, as it were. And here at 3e, you can see that I didn't like the way this was going to wrap around in the text. You know, there just wasn't enough room for all of that. And so I made it so that the prepositional phrase stayed together within this cell. And I like to use a clause layout when I do public reading, and so it just makes it a little bit easier for my eye to follow. In this section, we have a noun first clause and then a perfect instead of a preterite, and we are switching the active character in the scene. We've also gone to another location, it would seem, and so we have a new paragraph here, but it's also a new beat in the story. Here, God speaks, Jonah responds. Those two paragraphs go together to make a step, a beat in the story. Then we have a new one, where the Lord makes the storm, and then the sailors react to the storm. So we have two paragraphs there making another major step in the story. Here at 4c, this is not a preterite, and it is not starting a paragraph. It's telling us a result, so it's not moving the timeline forward. And so we've indented that line, and then this asher clause we have indented. Then here we have another noun first construction with a perfect that is starting a paragraph, and the preterites that follow depend on this perfect. So this one is out to the margin, and these are the actions of Jonah, and then we have the reaction of the ship's captain. So we have two paragraphs here, and those together make a step in the story. Then in response to that, we have a preterite out to the margin. We have what the sailors say. The first two, in this case, again, are volitional. And then they have an intended result, which we have indented. Then they actually do the action that they suggested to themselves. They cast lots, and the lot indicates Jonah. So, we could argue, I suppose, about whether we should call all of this one paragraph or two. I tend, whenever there's a direct speech, to treat that as a separate paragraph. And then once the lot has indicated Jonah, they say a bunch of things to him. So Vayomer, preterite out to the margin. All of these things I have indented one. And the way I would envision the story is not that the sailors are all saying in unison each of these questions, but probably they're standing around as a group and they each call out different questions. And so these are all on the same level. And then Vayomer again out to the margin, and Jonah gives his answer, and the asher clause we have indented. So there's actually several exchanges here, all right, an action and then a speech, and then action, and then speech followed by speech. But they're all wrapped around the response of these people to the storm. So we're going to keep all of those things together when we do our plot chart. At verse 10, we have what we call over-encoding. We know it's the sailors that would be speaking because Jonah spoke last. This is a plural verb. But the sailors, ha'anashim, the men, are explicitly stated, and that's one of the syntactical techniques for indicating the beginning of a paragraph. And because now that they've identified Jonah as the problem and they have a new level of awareness of what's involved, we've got a new beat or major step in the story. And you can see there's three segments here. They ask this question, so the quotation is indented. Then we have a key clause here, and that's the reason that they spoke to him. So 10D is indented to 10B, and 10C is indented to 10B, but 10C and 10D are themselves different things. So maybe think of it as, these are the children of 10B, but they're different from each other. Then we have another key clause in 10E, and this is content now rather than reason, but it's what they knew, yada'u key. And then we have another key clause, and this one is the reason that they knew. So we have the content of what they knew and the reason of what they knew. And so 10E and 10F, again, they're the children, as it were, of 10D, but they're different. So they end up being indented the same level, but they're not the same thing. Then they speak to him again. So even though it's the sailors speaking again, it's a new act of speech for them, and so it's a new paragraph. And the key clause here, which gives us the reason that they say this to him, is indented one clause in relationship to Vayomeru because it's modifying 11a. Within the speech itself, we have our main question and then the intended result, which we've indented here, 11c. And then we have Vayomer, another preterite, out to the margin, and we get his response. He starts with volitionals, so in this case, those are main line. We've got an intended result, which has been indented. We have a key clause, which is telling the reason why they should pick him up and throw him into the sea. And then another key clause, which is the content of a form of yada again. You'll notice in this section, there's actually three pieces instead of two. Most commonly, there's two, but there are sometimes three. And this is all dealing with the problem of what ought we to do, and the answer, well, you should throw me into the sea, because Jonah apparently isn't willing to go jump himself. And so this will be another column in our plot chart. And then at 13a, we have another case of over-encoding. We have ha-anashim, where we already know who this plural masculine verb would be pointing to. First they're going to try to get back to dry land. So velo yakolu, nice pausal form there, yakolu, not yakalu, is not moving the timeline forward. So, of course, it's also not a preterite. So that's why we've indented it. And then we have a key clause, which is giving us the reason that they were not able to. So it gets indented one more level in comparison. At 14a, we have a preterite. We're back out to the margin. He tells us what they said. Here, you might have handled this part a little bit differently because we have a clause embedded within a clause. Ki ata Adonai ka'asher hafatzta asita. So, because you, O Lord, you have done, and then in the middle is the direct object, just as you pleased. In teaching a Greek class, what I would normally do in that situation is put in ellipsis dots and then take the embedded clause and stick it down into the next line. Maybe you tried something like that here. It's so infrequent by comparison to Greek that we would need to do that sort of thing in Hebrew that if it's short, I usually just leave it there within the line. Sometimes, just to look ahead, sometimes what I'll do is I'll have that spread out. I can think of some cases in the prophets where I've had this come up, and we've got some sort of introduction. In this case, it would be the subject is stated, and then we have the dependent clause, which is really functioning as the direct object. Not putting spaces in there properly. I'm going to do it this way so it will get where I want it to be. And then that would leave the verb that goes with the very first line. In this case, well, the first 14D. I've got three 14Ds now. And I would have the verb in lined up with the subject because they belong together, so they must be at the same level. And then the clause that's stuck in the middle, that's embedded in the middle, I would have that indented because it is indeed grammatically dependent. So there are times when I do a structure like that. So if you tried something like that here, it's not wrong. But I just wanted to explain why I had done it the way I had, and that there are some fuzzy places on how to do the clause layout, but our principle is that it needs to show us the clause structure. It needs to show us the narrative framework and what things are moving forward in time. It needs to help us see what is a parenthetical comment, what is a supporting line, etc. So as long as we're still following all of those principles, there are a few places where we can do things more than one way and be just fine. At 16a, again, we have another case of over-encoding. So this is starting another section of the story. This is the denouement for the first act of this play. We have the response of the sailors, and we might even be tempted to make this a stronger break than we have here. We have the denouement, the after effects for the sailors, and then we have the after effects of chapter 1 for Jonah. So I've put those together. We can argue maybe we should do that a little bit differently. We have Jonah explicitly mentioned here. Are we starting a new? We have Vayihi, Jonah. Are we starting a new paragraph here? So maybe we could go back and forth a little bit, but you can see that we've got the continuity of the fish through all of these lines, and that these two things are a reaction to what happened here in the climax, which was we chucked Jonah out of the boat and the sea stopped raging. The sailors are responding to the sea stopped raging, and the Lord is responding to Jonah has been tossed into the sea. Okay, I think that's the main points. You can, of course, kind of scroll through here, compare to what you've got, make any questions or observations that you need to. And then we're going to use these bigger sections in order to make our plot chart. And in our plot chart, we're going to make observations about the characters or what's going on in the big picture sense of the story, or what would the narrator's tone of voice be. And these are the sections that we want to work through in terms of the meaning of the story. Okay, I hope that you're tracking with all of that and that you're understanding the things that we're trying to accomplish with this tool. The next step is going to be to work with the plot chart.